Good morning.
Good morning, Daniel.
And what is your name?
I'm Brian Gillan.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about your history in this area?
Right, well, I arrived here in 1980 from Scotland. Initially came for 3 months. At that time we had Margaret Thatcher in power, and I was very unhappy with what was happening in Britain at the time. And I decided I just want to get away for a while. It's that old adage about you can't change society, but you can change yourself. So I just wanted to get away, and I did. I came here for 3 months and I loved the place. And the first place I came here was Port Adelaide. And at that time, the port had a bit of a rough image. You know, people would say to me, oh, it's a bit rough down there. And coming from Glasgow, I came out to the port and I thought, well, what are they talking about? And what I could see was beautiful beaches, this gorgeous river, nice old houses, and a friendly community. And I'm kind of thinking, well, what is the issue? Anyway, I came here and applied for a job as a social worker, which is my background, in the old port mission. And I went for the interview, and it was a Reverend George Martin, a fantastic man, a great man. He interviewed me, and he looked at my CV, and I can always remember this. He looked at it, and he said, so you come from Glasgow, you were born in the Gorbals? I said, yeah, and he shut, and I thought, that's it. I was used to that, you know, it's like the stigma that follows you. And he said, well, there's not much I can tell you about poverty then, is there? And I got the job.
So do you remember when you first sort of noticed, I guess, the non-human life around here, the dolphins?
And I guess part of my Celtic culture, very much associated with that connection between humans and animals. So, for example, when I built my boat, the Celtic cultural thing is a vessel has a personality, and they're always called after a bird or a sea creature, whatever. So my boat's called Pelican, just in keeping with that theory. But for me, here in the Port River, in the Adelaide Dolphin Sanctuary, I was always very much interested in the dolphin breeding grounds. The first time I saw our dolphins here, I thought, wow, how come we've got these beautiful creatures, these wild animals in the Port River? Because coming from Glasgow, where you had big shipbuilding and heavy industry, it was almost like the river was dead. It's better now, but you never saw any marine life. And when I came here, I thought, wow, that's fantastic. And, you know, one of those wonderful experiences is going out there into the Barker Inlet in a kayak, and these dolphins come right up alongside you. You shouldn't and you mustn't, but you could just about touch them. That's how close they come. And I thought, isn't that fantastic? And I couldn't kind of understand why more people here were more enamored with these. I thought it's great. So when I take the kids out, that's one of the things we look for. I'd like to just tell you a little story about, as I said earlier, I've written a book called Who Can Save the Dolphins. It's only a short story, but it's got a big message. But how that book came around was, one day I was out there with a group of school kids, and we take them up the river and we point out the historical aspects, all the old ships, that sort of stuff. And we're always looking for dolphins. When the kids see the dolphins, they love them. One day, we came across this little dolphin. It was entangled with the fishing line, and it was right next to us. You could clearly see it. And the kids were really upset, really perturbed by this. And there was one little girl in particular who was said to me, she was crying. She said, oh, why do people do this and blah, blah, blah. I was trying to explain to her, but she was just so incensed. And I don't know, it just played on my mind. When she was asking me why, I was just so much aware that no matter what I said, I couldn't adequately explain to her why we would harm these beautiful wild creatures. Anyway, I went home that night, and the next morning I woke up and I started to write Who Can Save the Dolphins. And it's a little book, but it's fiction. It's about 3 little girls who find a baby dolphin that swallowed a plastic bag which happens all too often, and then go off to save the dolphins and get in trouble and a whole big adventure. It's fiction, but it's based on fact that it's got a happy ending. But the point is, it's about trying to raise awareness of we've got these wild creatures. They've been part of Port Adelaide folklore. In fact, if you look at some of the old early paintings, the colonial times, there's a painting set here where you've got Aboriginal people sitting across the other side of the river, and there's no dolphins in the river. And yet the Aboriginal people will tell us that the dolphins were always in this river as long as they've been here. When the first settlers came, for some unknown reason, the dolphins disappeared. And nobody knows why. Maybe it was the dredging, maybe it was just maybe they were hunting them, I don't know, no one knows. But then they started to come back again, and that's another thing. Why did they disappear? Why did they come back? So they've always been part of this community. And so, and in fact, there's a group of us who think that our Port Adelaide Council should have 2 dolphins in their coat of arms rather than what they've got, bales of hay or something, isn't it? So getting back to the dolphins, they've always been part of this community, and I think we should value them and protect them. And that was the whole idea of the genesis of this book and these kids. And so that's why I wrote this little book. But if we can start to raise more awareness about, we've got this wonderful gifted, because we've got these lovely wild dolphins come right into the port, and they're very playful things. But yet we're not doing a lot to protect them. And so in my story, a calf swallows a plastic bag. That happens. I think we lost about 4 calves in the last couple of years. And so, they get damaged by fishing line, they get damaged by boat strike, they get damaged by the pollutants that's in the water. And so I just think it would be, we in this community should all be taking more responsibility about trying to keep the river clean, try to stop the plastics getting into the food chain, and just respecting these wild dolphins that we've got. And then they might stay around and we might start to appreciate them a bit better.
Beautiful. They've got a lot of personality, the dolphins, haven't they?
Well, they've got a big brain. I mean, they've been around for a long time. They've been around in the evolution process a lot longer than human beings have been. And when you look at the brain in comparative to the body, they've got a huge brain. Their brains are about the same size as human beings. And a lot of people are saying our brains are too big, we're too smart. I don't know if they're smart at all. But, and so because they've got this big brain, most mammals, animals, their life is spent, they're born, they hunt for food, they breed, and they die. The dolphins actually have got a whole playful aspect of their personality. They're very social things, they can communicate, they've got this echolocation thing where they can use their radar to see pictures. And it's because they're very playful, because they've got a higher kind of evolution process, because of the big brains. It's one of the things that's to their detriment. So for example, they'll come up to, if you're fishing and you throw them a fish, they'll always come back to get more fish, and that's how they get into trouble. So we're trying to educate people to not feed them. If you're fishing, you've got fishing lines, don't leave it lying around, because they'll get stuck in the tubes. But the fact that dolphins are very sociable, that we've got our hero here is Billy, and I think there should be a monument to Billy. She was one of the first dolphins who we can trace back that was in captivity, got out of captivity, came here, but was doing the tail walking that they get taught, and she's then taught subsequent generations of, and it's just a delight to see, what I mean? Where else do you see that in a wild environment? And so that's an aspect of the fact that they are social, they are very playful, they do communicate with each other, and the sad fact is we've got a pod of about 40 here, Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphins, and unless we actually start to do something about them, I don't know if my grandkids will be able to go and see those dolphins. The thing that worries me is, I said earlier that as far as this state is concerned, when Colonel Light discovered, or whoever discovered the Port River, they said, yeah, that's where we're going to make a port. Along with that historical context of the folklore, the dolphins have always been mentioned, always been part of this community, and the dolphin breeding grounds are just out here at the Barker Inlet, where you've got the mangroves, dolphin feeding grounds. So they've always been part of this community. Now, what really worries me is that they've been around for a long time. We've registered there's about 40, it fluctuates, of resident dolphins, and they come and they go. But in the last, well, in my lifetime, plastic really only started to hit the world in a production base in the 1950s. So we've got all this length of time. And all of a sudden in the 50s, well, the first plastic was discovered was 1907. It was Bakelite, that was a forerunner. The two world wars kind of like retarded its production. After the war, it just was this explosion. So in my lifetime, we've had this huge explosion of plastic. Now, some scientists are saying there's more plastic in the water, because that's what it ends up. It never breaks down, it never goes away, and it's killing our marine life. And I really do worry that, will my grandchildren be able to go out here and enjoy watching these dolphins? And what can these dolphins teach us? They've been around for a long time, because we're killing them, and we're killing the whole food chain. Scientists call it the Anthropocene. We're in a new epoch. That new epoch is the first time that human beings have shaped the environment rather than the environment shaping us. And it worries me that in such a short space of time, in one lifetime, we've produced all this plastic, and every day we're producing more, and every day it's getting into the water, and every day it's killing more marine life. And I think it's a horrible legacy that we are handing over to these kids now. And when I take them out in the boat, these 10-year-olds, these 12, they really get it. You know, they're really, more than any other generation I've met, they're really aware of the environment and the damage we're doing to it. So if we really do care about the animals and the animal world that we share, then why are we not doing more to protect them? And yet it's not that hard. You know, there's a lovely young, I think she'd be 10 or 12 now, I don't know, girl. She's Molly Steer. She's on YouTube, and she's got a talk called Straws Suck. And she started a campaign to get rid of the plastic straws up in cairns, because she went out to the barrier reef and she saw them in the reef. And she says quite poignantly, I've made a decision, a 9-year-old kid when she's saying this, I've made a decision that I'm not going to have straws anymore. And if I go to a cafe and someone gives me a straw, I'm going to ask them, tell them I don't want it, and tell them why. And she said, it's dead easy. I've made that decision now. That's something that I'm doing that I can do. And it's those kind of things that I think if we all think about it, then maybe we'll all do a bit more to protect the marine life and change a bit of our lifestyle.
Just thinking about what you were saying before, I mean, obviously you care a great deal about the dolphins, and that's why it's hard to watch this kind of stuff unfolding with plastic and so on. But that initial connection with them, do you think it's, you know, because of the way they communicate, the way they engage with everything, or humans in particular?
I guess it's the same thing that, why do people have pets as dogs and cats? Well, what are they getting out of it? When that dog wags its tail, what is that human being? What's the contract between them? Mm-hmm. You know, it's what's happening there. You know, if we go out into the water in the wild, and I think that's the magical thing, is these are wild creatures, and they come up and they want to play with us, or they're bobbing around, and it's just the way they look. They always look like they've got a great big smile on their face, and they turn over on the side and they flip. You know, if you've been out in the water and you see them, you just can't help being impressed, you know. And they bring joy, they make you laugh. Mm-hmm. Then the flip side of that is the tragedy around, well, these beautiful creatures that evolved over something like 350 million years, so they're here and we're here, and we've got this kind of interaction. And then you're starting to think, are they going to be around in another 100 years? It's not just the dolphins, you know, if you look at the whole marine environment, right down through the whole feeding chain, right down to the coral, it's been covered with rubbish that because we don't know what to do with it, we put it, you know, we might not literally chuck it in the river, but that's where it ends up. And we're killing that environment. And what I'm trying to say is, I think by killing that environment, we're actually killing ourselves as part of our planet. If we see ourselves as joining with animals as part of a species, then we're kind of like what we're doing to ourselves, you know. And a lot of it's in ignorance. I understand that, and you know, unintended consequences. And I know you can't stop plastic. It's not just the plastic is important, but we know you can't stop it. But we can actually modify it. We can think a lot more about what we can do. So I just think about that in the context of, as I said, there's already been dolphin species which are now extinct. They're gone. Will we ever get them back again? You know, how many more do we do until we start to wake up to ourselves and say, well, how can we take control of this? And as I said, the horrible legacy that we are leaving to our children and our grandchildren is this mess that is created in our watch.
This might be a too big a question, but how do you think we can wake up to ourselves?
I think we need to sort of take a bit of a thought process, and we need to think about this. When I was a teenager, I was born in 1951, 6 years after the Second World War, and our whole generation had been profoundly affected by the Second World War. I mean, I can remember in Glasgow going to school, and there were still bomb craters, you know, old buildings that had been bombed and not collapsed yet. That really affected us. And so our generation, when we became teenagers, were really focused on, we didn't want another war. So hence in the 60s we had this huge ban the bomb movement, and it was huge, and you were involved in it. There was marches, and it wasn't a hippie thing, it was saying, we don't want to do what they've done before us, we'll never let that happen again. And I think we were that engrossed in that whole process that we took our eye off, or didn't even think about the environment. This generation, I think, now have to think about the environment, and so that the how I think is going to come from this younger generation. I think they're going to really seriously take this on and say, okay, well, this happened in your watch, Grandad or Dad. We're going to have to do something about it, and they are, because if they don't do it, well, I don't know how much of the world we're going to have left for their kids and their grandkids. So I don't know the answer. It's a complex issue. I was up in Indonesia a couple of years ago, and some of the islands and the archipelago there, and it was just full of plastic. Beautiful beaches, full of plastic. And when you speak to the locals, they don't have, and many of them don't have, waste removal. They don't have trucks come around, they don't put their bins out. So the rubbish is everywhere, and they just put it in the sea. Well, you times that by, you know, and a lot of that comes down and lands in the north coast of Australia. So it's there, and it's a problem, and we're going to have to deal with it. And we're going to have to think bigger than us. We're going to have to think global about it. Somebody puts something in, as in this case Indonesia, and it ends up in our beaches. So it's about how do we collectively do something about this? And I believe we will be.
Well, we should probably wind up, but is there anything else you'd like to say about the dolphins to finish?
Well, I just think I'm just watching this person out here in a kayak right now, and the fog's lifted and the sun's coming out and it's burning off, and it's nice. I just think we've got a wonderful environment here. The Barker Inlet is a jewel, it really is, and most people don't even know it exists. The mangroves, the fishing grounds, and it's not just about dolphins, it's just about that whole ecological environment thing. And what I'd like to say is I just would like more people to come here to see it and to appreciate it, and appreciate that it's a wild phenomenon, a beautiful part of the world, and we should take care of it better than we do.
Thank you very much, Brian. That's beautiful.
Okay.